Hey, and welcome to or welcome back to the Average Joe Nerdcast. I'm Nate, your resident Average Joe, which means I'm not a film critic. Fuck those guys. And I'm for sure not a filmmaker. I'm just a guy who grew up loving movies a little too much, and now I have a microphone and way too many thoughts about them. And if you're new here, welcome to the show. This is the podcast where we take movies, games, and pop culture stuff that meant something to us, and we don't just recap it. We try to figure out why it worked, why it stuck, and why it hit when it hit. And if you're a returning listener, you probably already know my toxic trait is thinking I can keep it tight and then ending up with a full-length deep dive anyway. So today, we're starting a brand new run, and I'm really excited about this one. I'm deep diving the Avatar trilogy, movie by movie, and we're starting with the very first film. Now, before we even start, I need to say something out loud, because I think it matters for tone. Avatar is one of those movies where the discourse got louder than the experience. Like, people don't just say, I liked it, or I didn't like it. They say stuff like, Avatar has no cultural footprint, or it's just Pocahontas in space, or it's all visuals. And I'm not here to pretend those takes don't exist, because they absolutely do. But I am here to say something that might sound simple. I love Avatar. I find it engaging. I love the world, the characters, and the struggle. And I don't need complexity to hook me. If a story is emotionally honest, if the world feels alive, and if the stakes feel real, I'm totally in. So today's goal is not to win any kind of argument. Today's goal is to explain why Avatar works, especially for people like me, and why simple isn't the insult people really think it is. Because Avatar's strength isn't that it outsmarts you. Its strength is that it absorbs you. And that starts with one key choice. Avatar doesn't chase complexity. It chases immersion. Here's the thing. We've trained ourselves to treat simple story like a red flag. Like if you can predict where it's going, the movie failed. And I don't buy that. Because predictable isn't the same thing as weak. Sometimes predictability is what lets emotion land. If I'm watching a movie and I'm constantly trying to solve it like a puzzle, I'm not feeling it. I'm overanalyzing it. And there are movies where that's the entire point. Avatar is not that. Avatar is trying to do something else entirely. It's trying to make you live somewhere. And that's where simplicity becomes a tool. Because the bigger the world you're building, the more you need the story to act like a guide rail, not a maze. This is a thing I've noticed across a lot of movies and video games. Confusion is the enemy of immersion. If I don't understand where I am, or why something matters, or what the rules are, my brain refuses to settle in. It stays on the outside. Avatar does the exact opposite. It wants you oriented. It wants you comfortable. It wants your brain to stop asking, wait, what? So it can start asking, oh no, what's going to happen to this place? That's the emotional trade-off. Clarity buys you investment. And if there's one director who understands that trade better than almost anybody, it's James Cameron. And I want to be clear about this right at the top. I love James Cameron films. A lot of his movies sit on my personal Mount Rushmore. And not because they're perfect, but because he commits. Cameron doesn't half-step. He doesn't do that modern thing where the movie undercuts itself for a joke because it's scared to be sincere. He goes all in. And Avatar is sincerity on a massive scale. And that's why it works for me. It's not embarrassed about its heart. So when people say, it's simple, I don't hear, it's weak. What I hear is, it's doing exactly what it set out to do. And that leads us to the real deep dive. Because if Avatar is immersion first, then the real star of the film is not Jake. It's not even the plot. It's the place itself. Pandora is the reason Avatar works, not just because it's a beautiful place, but because it feels truly alive, like it exists with or without the camera. So, next, we're going to slow down and go piece by piece. What makes Pandora feel like a system instead of a set? Why does that make the struggle hit harder? And why does that sincerity pull people in, even today? A lot of movies have a world. Most of them feel like a set, a stage, a sandbox built specifically for the plot. Pandora, on the other hand, feels the exact opposite. Pandora feels like a place that would still be doing its own thing, even if the humans never landed there. And this is where I think people undersell what Cameron managed to pull off. Because saying Pandora looks good is like saying the ocean is wet. That's not the point. The point is that Pandora doesn't just look pretty, it feels truly lived in. Like, you ever watch a movie where the world is gorgeous, but it feels like a screensaver almost? Like the second the characters leave the screen, the world just shuts off. That's a set. Pandora doesn't shut off. And here's a weird truth about immersion. Your brain doesn't fall in love with visuals alone. Your brain falls in love with rules. Not rules like a textbook, no. But rules like, when this happens, that happens. If you touch this, it reacts. If you step here, the environment responds. And the reason that matters is because once your brain recognizes consistent cause and effect, it stops questioning whether the world is fake. It stops doing math. It stops giving, how'd they make that? And it starts going, oh, damn, I don't want anything bad to happen here. One of the simplest ways I can describe Pandora is this. The world responds. The forest responds to movement. Creatures respond to sound. The environment feels like it has instincts. It isn't waiting for the plot. It's reacting like it's truly alive. And that is the difference between a world you admire and a world you feel responsible for. And another thing that makes Pandora work for me is that it's not just visual, it's sensory. The sound design, the way you hear life everywhere, the way the space feels dense, like you're in a humid jungle where everything is breathing. Even when nothing important is happening, Pandora still feels active. It's like you can almost smell it. And when a movie can make you feel a place like that, yeah, dude, I'm locked in. And this loops back to what I said earlier about complexity. I don't need a twisty plot to hook me if the world is doing all the heavy lifting. Because when the place feels real, the stakes feel real. And when the stakes feel real, the struggle hits even harder. Pandora makes the conflict personal before the conflict even shows up. That's what good world building does. And look, I've got to say this too. Pandora is one of those worlds that benefits from scale. This is why the first time you see Avatar in a theater, it hits you different. Because the world is bigger than your vision. It surrounds you. You can't casually look away. You're not checking your phone. You're not multitasking. You're there. And a world like Pandora needs you there. So if Pandora feels like a place that exists without you, the next question is, how does it teach you its rules without turning the movie into homework? Because Avatar doesn't stop for a lecture. It shows you how Pandora works through little details. And the biggest detail, one of the coolest details, is the bioluminescence. Because it isn't just pretty, it's functional. Because Avatar never stops to explain itself. It doesn't sit you down and go, okay, kids, here's how this works. It just shows you. There's something me and Ian say all the time when we talk about movies. It's better when they show and they don't tell. Most movies say they do it. Avatar actually commits to it. You're not handed a glossary. You're not hit with lore dumps. You learn Pandora the same way Jake does, by being in it. And that's a big reason the movie feels approachable instead of overwhelming. So let's talk about the bioluminescence for just a second, because yes, it does look incredible, but that's not why it matters. The glow isn't just there to make the planet look cool. It responds to movement. It reacts to touch. It communicates. So without anyone ever saying it out loud, you learn something really important. This planet is alive in a way Earth in this universe isn't. It's not passive. It notices you. And here's the thing, your brain picks that up instantly. You don't consciously go, yes, a responsive biosphere. You just feel it. And once you feel it, your behavior changes as a viewer. You lean in. You start paying attention to where characters step. You start anticipating reactions. That's immersion doing its job well. And then there's the bond, the neural connection, the thing that on paper could have felt completely ridiculous. But the way Avatar introduces it, it's casual, it's normalized, it's treated like brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. No one stops to marvel at it. No one gives a big speech. It's just how life works here. And that is huge, because the fastest way to make a world feel fake is to constantly point at it and say, "Isn't this crazy?" Avatar doesn't do that. It treats its own rules as mundane. And when a movie treats its weird shit as normal, your brain begins to follow suit. You know, what Avatar really teaches you is cause and effect. If you move recklessly, the world reacts accordingly. If you disrespect the environment, there are consequences. If you approach with care, you are rewarded. That's not exposition. That's behavior. And fairness matters, even in fantasy, especially in fantasy. Because when the rules are consistent, nothing feels arbitrary. When something goes wrong later, you don't feel manipulated. You think, yeah, that tracks. And that's the difference between emotional payoff and emotional cheating. This is also why Jake works as our way into the world. Not because he's the most complex character ever written, but because he learns at our pace. He messes up. He misreads situations. He has to adjust. And every time he does, we understand why. Because the movie has already taught us the rule he broke. And this is where all of this starts to matter emotionally. Because once you understand the rules of Pandora, you understand what's at stake. You know what happens when balance is disrupted. You know what's being threatened. So when conflict escalates, it doesn't feel abstract. It feels personal. And that leads to the next layer of why Pandora works for me. Because the planet isn't just alive, it's treated as something sacred, not metaphorically, literally. And that sincerity, especially in a modern blockbuster, is a huge risk. So next, we need to talk about Awa and why Avatar is not afraid to believe in its own spirituality. So once you understand the rules of Pandora, once you see how the world responds and how cause and effect work, there's one more step Avatar takes that a lot of blockbusters avoid completely. It asks you to believe that this world is sacred. And this is usually where I hear people start to push back. They'll say shit like, Awa is cheesy, it's too spiritual, it's just space magic. And I get why people feel that way. But for me, Awa is one of the reasons Avatar works as well as it does. Because you see, Awa isn't there to solve problems. It's not a cheat code, and it's not a twist. Awa is the belief system of Pandora. It's the idea that everything here is connected, that nothing exists in isolation, that memory, life, and consequence are all shared. That's not lore. That's philosophy. And notice something important. The movie never fully explains Awa. You don't get a clean diagram. You don't get a scientific breakdown that neatly ties it up. And that is truly intentional. Because belief systems don't work when they're over-explained. They work when they're felt. This is the line Avatar walks really, really confidently. Awa is biological. It's a neural network. It's grounded in the idea of a planetary system, but it's also spiritual. It carries memory, it carries meaning, it demands respect. And Avatar doesn't try to sand that edge down to make it more palatable. I think part of the reason Awa rubs some people the wrong way is because modern blockbusters are terrified of sincerity. Everything has to be undercut. Every emotional moment needs a joke. Every belief needs distance. Avatar does not do that. It commits fully. Treating nature as sacred is risky. Treating connection as real is also risky. Treating belief as something worth defending is even riskier. But Avatar never winks at you. It never apologizes for caring. And it never says, "Don't worry, we know this is all silly." It instead says, "This matters here, so take it seriously." And that sincerity is why the world pulls me in. Because if the movie believed in Pandora, I could too. If the characters treat Awa with reverence, I understand why. It's not asking me to convert. It's asking me to respect the rules of the place I'm visiting. And here's the big thing Awa adds. It turns the conflict from a resource fight into a morality one. It's not just land. It's not just minerals. It's memory. It's life. It's continuity. So when Pandora is threatened by the RDA, it's not just destruction. It's erasure. And this is important because when the planet responds later in the film, it doesn't feel like a cheap miracle. It feels truly earned. Because the movie has been telling you the entire time. The world remembers. The world reacts. The world pushes back. And this loops right back into why I don't need complexity to be truly engaged. I don't need twists. I don't need cleverness. If the world has values, if the conflict is rooted in belief, I'm totally in. And that is enough for me. And once the movie establishes Pandora as sacred, once it establishes the rules, the belief, and the consequence, the next thing it has to do is something even harder. It has to show us a culture that actually lives by those beliefs, not as aesthetics and not as costumes, but as rules people are held to. We need to talk about the Na'vi themselves and why Avatar treats culture as something with boundaries, not vibes. A lot of movies fake culture. They give you costumes, accents, and aesthetics, but no rules. Here's how I always think about culture in movies. If there are no expectations, if there are no lines you can cross, if there are no consequences, then it's not really a culture. It's just a theme. The Na'vi don't feel like a theme. They feel like a real people. The rituals in Avatar aren't just ceremonial. They're instructional. They tell you how life is supposed to be lived here. When to hunt, how to hunt, what deserves respect, what doesn't belong to you. And those rituals aren't optional. They're enforced. This is something Avatar does really, really well. Jake doesn't just show up and get accepted. He messes up. He misunderstands. He assumes. And when he does, the movie doesn't soften the blow. He's corrected, sometimes sharply, sometimes painfully. And that tells us something very important. This culture doesn't bend just because he's the protagonist. Neytiri is the character that makes all this work, not as a love interest, but as the enforcer of this world's values. She doesn't exist to explain Pandora gently. She exists to push back. She corrects Jake when he disrespects the forest. She challenges him when he assumes entitlement. She withholds approval until it's actually earned. This is where Avatar avoids one of the biggest pitfalls of outsider stories. Jake isn't rewarded for curiosity alone. He's rewarded for humility. And even then, acceptance is conditional. And that is important because it tells us the culture isn't there to validate him. He has to adapt to it. And this is the part I really respect. When Jake violates trust, there are consequences. Real ones. Not misunderstandings that get smoothed over. Not emotional shortcuts. Actual rejection. And that rejection hurts. Because by that point in the film, we understand what it costs. This is why the conflict in Avatar works for me. It's not muddy, and it's not abstract. It's very clear what each side values. One side sees Pandora as a resource, the other sees it as home. And because the Na'vi culture has rules, that clash feels honest. So at this point in the movie, I'm not watching explosions. I'm watching a way of life under threat. And that's the difference. Because when a movie makes you care about a culture, not just characters, the stakes expand. This is a big reason Avatar works for me emotionally. It doesn't ask me to solve anything. It asks me to choose. Do I understand why this world matters? Do I understand why these people are fighting? And the answer is yes. And once you care about the place, once you care about the culture, there's only one thing left to examine: the struggle itself, the pressure applied to this world, and the people pushing against it. So next, we have to talk about the conflict and why it feels so emotionally legible instead of morally confusing. I think we've trained ourselves to equate moral clarity with simplicity. Like if a conflict isn't morally messy, it must be shallow. And I don't buy that shit. Sometimes clarity is what lets emotions land. In Avatar, you understand the struggle almost immediately. One side sees Pandora as just a resource, and the other sees it as home. That's it. And you know what? That's enough. This is where Colonel Quaritch comes in. He's not subtle. He's not conflicted. He doesn't pretend to be something he isn't. He represents force, extraction, and ultimately, control. And the movie never tries to soften that. That doesn't make him cartoonish. It makes him legible. When a movie makes its values clear, you stop spending energy figuring out what it's really saying. You start feeling what's at stake. I don't need Quaritch to have a tragic backstory. I need him to apply pressure. And pressure is exactly what he brings. What I love about the conflict in Avatar is that it never stays abstract. It's not just corporations versus nature. It's not just ideology versus ideology. It's trees being destroyed, homes being erased, lives being displaced. And because we understand Pandora's rules, we understand the cost almost immediately. This is another place where Avatar gets accused of being heavy-handed. And again, I totally get the criticism. But for me, it really doesn't feel preachy, because the movie isn't yelling at you. It's showing consequences. When a place is alive, destroying it feels ultra-violent. And this is where Jake's arc actually works for me. Not because he's uniquely special, but because the world forces him to make a choice. He can't stay neutral in this conflict. He cannot half commit. The rules of Pandora will not allow it. And because we understand those rules, his choice carries weight. This is where I'll say it plainly. I don't need a twist in this story. I don't need the villain to secretly be right. And I don't need moral ambiguity for the sake of it. I need emotional honesty. And Avatar gives me that. When the conflict escalates, it doesn't feel like escalation for spectacle's sake. It feels like an inevitable collision. Two value systems, one world, no compromise. And that inevitability is what gives the climax its power. So when the fight does come, when Pandora pushes back, it doesn't feel like a miracle. It feels like a response, like consequence catching up to the action. And that's why the ending works for me emotionally. At this point, Avatar has done all the hard work. It made me care about a place. It taught me the rules. It's shown me a culture worth defending. And it's applied pressure in a way that feels truly honest. That's not shallow. That's completely effective. And now that the world, the culture, and the struggle are firmly in place, we can talk about the people living inside it and why their emotional journeys land the way they do. Because a fantastic world without characters is just a documentary. And Avatar doesn't want to observe Pandora. It wants you to feel it. And I think Jake Sully gets unfairly written off a lot. People call him bland or boring or a placeholder. And yeah, he's not flashy. But I don't think he's really supposed to be. Jake doesn't enter Avatar as a hero. He enters it as someone with nothing. No direction, no future, no purpose. And that matters. Because Jake isn't searching for adventure. He's searching for meaning. Jake's physical disability isn't just a plot device. It's symbolic. He's cut off from the world he's in. He doesn't feel whole. He doesn't feel useful. And Pandora offers him something Earth never did: belonging, agency, and connection. And this is important. The Avatar body isn't just a power-up. It's a chance for Jake to feel complete again. He doesn't just run for the first time. He feels present for the very first time in a long time. And that emotional shift is subtle, but it is foundational. Jake doesn't become Na'vi because he wants to be special. He becomes Na'vi because the world demands change. He's corrected, humbled, rejected, and forced to adapt. And that's why his eventual choice works 100% for me, because it costs him everything. And that choice would not land if there wasn't someone holding him to account. Neytiri is not a reward. She's not a guide with infinite patience. She's the conscience of Pandora. She challenges Jake constantly. She corrects him. She pushes back. And that friction is the entire point. The relationship isn't built on attraction. It's built on respect. And respect is always earned. She doesn't soften the rules. She enforces them. When Neytiri grieves, it's not symbolic. It's visceral. Her pain makes the cost of the conflict undeniable. And because we respect her, we truly feel that loss. If Jake is the lens, Neytiri is the soul. She represents what's being protected and what's being lost. And for that struggle to matter, there has to be pressure. Quaritch is fascinating to me because he's not complicated, and that is intentional. He doesn't debate, he doesn't rationalize, he only advances. He represents inevitability, the thing that keeps coming. In a movie about immersion and connection, the antagonist doesn't need nuance, he just needs weight. Quaritch isn't here to be understood, he's here to test. He believes in total dominance, control, extraction. And that belief system is fundamentally incompatible with the world of Pandora. So when you put these three together, Jake represents possibility, Neytiri represents belonging, Quaritch represents pressure, and those forces collide cleanly. And that clarity is why the emotional beats land. Everyone's motivation is legible, and no one is operating in bad faith. You see, I don't need cleverness here. I just need honesty, and Avatar gives me that in spades. So by the time the story reaches its breaking point, I'm not watching characters move through a plot. I'm watching people make choices that feel inevitable. And that's why the climax works for me too, because it's not about spectacle. It's all about commitment. And that brings us to the last piece of why Avatar hit the way it did. How it was meant to be experienced. Because Avatar is not a movie that wants to be skimmed. It wants to be entered. You see, Avatar is one of those rare movies where scale isn't just spectacle. It's functional. The frame is huge. The environments are dense. There's always something happening at the edge of the screen. And that matters. Because the movie doesn't want you multitasking. It wants your full, undivided attention. This isn't background cinema. This is sit down, turn the lights off, and put the phone away cinema. This is why Avatar hits different in a movie theater. Not because of hype, but because of immersion. The screen fills your entire vision. The sound surrounds you. You're not peeking at something. You truly are inside it. And when Pandora fills your senses like that, it's easier to believe in it. And one thing I remember really clearly about seeing Avatar the very first time was how quiet the theater got. And not a bored quiet, a focused quiet. The kind of quiet where people aren't reacting outwardly, because they're processing inwardly. And that silence tells you something very important. People weren't waiting for the next beat, they were truly present. And I think this is where some of the disconnect comes from for people revisiting Avatar later, on a couch, on a smaller screen, with distractions. Pandora shrinks, the density thins out, the world doesn't wrap around you in the same way. And that doesn't mean the movie fails, no. It just means it was designed for a different kind of engagement. This is also why Avatar's sincerity works better at scale, because sincerity is easier to accept when you're fully immersed. When you're only halfway paying attention, earnestness can feel cheesy, but when you're locked in, it feels completely honest. Avatar doesn't crack jokes to release tension. It doesn't wink at you to let you off the hook. It trusts the audience to sit with the emotion, to sit with beauty, to sit with loss. And that trust goes both ways. I think Avatar works best when you don't rewatch it to analyze it. When you don't treat it like a test you have to pass. When you rewatch it the same way you'd revisit a place. Slowly, patiently, letting it wash over you. That's when the magic comes back. So when I think about why Avatar still works for me, it's not because I'm impressed. It's because I'm engaged. And that engagement isn't accidental. It's the result of a movie that knows exactly how it wants to be experienced. And that's why Avatar is the right foundation for this trilogy. Because everything that comes next builds outward from this feeling. Avatar isn't trying to say everything. It's just trying to establish something. A place, a value system, an emotional grammar. It's the movie that says this is how this world works. This is what matters here. This is what's worth fighting for. And once all of that is in place, everything that comes after has something solid to build on. One of the things I really respect about Avatar is how contained it feels. The stakes are huge, yes, but the story itself is focused. It's about one place, one culture, and one struggle. And that restraint is intentional. Because Cameron isn't racing to escalation. He's building roots. You can't tell a multi-film saga about belonging, family, and consequence if you haven't first taught the audience how to care. I don't love Avatar because it's complicated. I love it because it's honest. It doesn't hide behind irony. It doesn't undercut its emotions. It believes in its world and asks you to do the same. And for me, that's more than enough. This is why starting here matters. Because the rest of the Avatar saga doesn't replace this foundation. It just expands upon it. The next films aren't about reinventing Pandora. They're about deepening it, about family, about legacy, about what happens after you've chosen a place to belong. And that only works if the first film did its job. So when people ask me why Avatar works, this is my answer. It made me care about a world. It made me respect a culture. And it made the struggle feel worth investing in. I don't need complexity to hook me. I just need sincerity. And Avatar delivers that. So if you made it all the way to the end of this one, seriously, thank you. These deep dives only work because you're willing to sit with them. So if you enjoyed this episode, follow the show. Subscribe wherever you're listening right now. And if you've got a quick second, please leave a 5-star review. It genuinely helps the show find more listeners like you. And I want to hear from you too. Did Avatar work for you the same way it works for me? Or did it hit you differently? Hit me up in the comments or on socials. Go to Facebook and search Average Joe Nerdcast and you will find the page. And let me know what you want us to tackle next. As always, shout out to my player too. And shout out to everyone behind the scenes who keep me pushing forward. And shout out to you for hanging out with me. Remember, the lobby's always open. Stay gold, nerd bold, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Game over.